responsibility. When you're being vetted for the second time as the Cabinet Secretary Interior, there was a lot of praise heaped on you for combating banditry in the north of Kenya. And you appeared to acknowledge that. Was the police in the North Rift under different command, so much so that when it comes to the Gen Z protests, you're not the one in charge, but when it comes to the North Rift, you will take the glory?
At no time have I said I've been in charge of the operations on banditry, because the Minister for Interior does not play that role. Have I provided it policy leadership to deal with banditry in the last 2 years? The answer is yes, in a very consequential manner, with great humility, because other than advising on the establishment of the Operation Maliza Uhalifu and the gazettement of the disturbed areas, that's the job now of the minister. Those are policy interventions. But I was able to push through in a very difficult financial situation prevailing then in the country, an injection of a significant amount of resources to acquire equipment to assist the police in their operations, which has been the missing link for many years. AMRAPs, that is the mine resistance ambush protected vehicles, armored personnel carriers, drones, that is the aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles, and so many other, including personal protection items. So, in a very modest way, I would want to be associated with the tremendous work done by the police, with the support of the military, to dismantle the infrastructure of banditry in the North Rift, because I provided policy support for the acquisition of modern weapons, and also providing the legal space for the police to carry out operations, especially in the areas which I classified as disturbed and dangerous, because that is where criminals were always retreating and regrouping. Those areas today are completely free from bandits.
The question here, Your Excellency, is on the question of responsibility. Local NGOs, the United Nations, the US government, the foreign missions have admonished the government of the Republic of Kenya over its human rights record, and particularly the handling of a Gen Z protests. My question to you tonight is, when the Republic of Kenya is being admonished, who takes responsibility?
Well, as I have said, you see, the general admonition or viewpoints by various stakeholders on the performance of government on many things, including homeland security, is a legitimate thing. But the question of responsibility arises when one believes that there is something they have done wrong. It doesn't arise when someone's conscience is crystal clear. They have not done anything wrong. From where I sit, the nearly 700 days I served as Kenya's Interior Minister, I can account for each of those days what I did for this country, sometimes under great distress and risk, which I knew I'm exposing myself, but because of duty, I had to do it. Some of the places I did, my predecessors never ventured into them. I spent nights in police barracks and military barracks with frontline soldiers, not to command them, but to give them moral support, including on Christmas Day, including on Easter, places like Lamu, where terror attacks were the order of the day, to give them support that the government has not sent these officers there to die. They have sent them there to protect the nation, and as minister, my moral support and the policy guidance I gave, I think, was instrumental in a big way because of the feedback I have received from the officers. So to answer your question, therefore, I am not saying that our homeland security system is perfect. It is work in progress. But responsibility is individual. It's not collective.
I must remind you, Prof, and the viewers, that there's a lot of rain here, so we'll have to speak a bit louder so that we can be heard. But as you speak about policy guidelines and taking modest credits for what was done in the North Rift on banditry, are you trying to, and taking modest credits for what was done in the North Rift on banditry, are you trying to tell us that you could not give policy guidelines on how police protests or moral support in them ensuring that they adhere to human rights?
We did.
So what happened? What went wrong?
What went wrong is what goes wrong when maybe, the operations, security operations are intense and emotive operations. It's not somewhere where an officer will be told, when you reach there, do this, do this, do the other. So what we have are general policy guidelines. For example, the use of labor force is reserved when to apply when the life of the officer is at risk.
So was any officer's life in danger? Allow me, Professor Kindiki, yes. Was any police officer in danger when David Shege and Enoch Chalo, Erickson Chalo Mutisia only had a flag and they were dancing outside Parliament? What threat did they pose to security officers at Parliament?
That is a matter under investigations. If the circumstances you're reading out there is what happened, the officers will be accountable. It's as simple as that.
And how long will that take?
As soon as IPOA completes the investigations and forwards the files to the DPP. Criminal investigations are complex. They involve scientific assembling of evidence. It is not enough to rush suspects to court only for cases to collapse. And it is not uniquely a Kenyan issue. Criminal investigations, especially in a complex endeavor like the situation we're referring them to, take a bit of time, and therefore I'm hopeful that...
Why were the police in mask? How complex was that? That we
again,
see who was ensuring security is not breached?
You're just telling me what you think or saw.
But it was
which is part of evidence.
It was on live TV. There are photos of police officers who are masked. You can't identify them.
I'm not disputing.
But
just telling
the
you,
CS Interior,
that is part of the evidence that is required to hold into account any person who may have been involved in that unfortunate incident you're explaining.
Your Excellency, if you were to move this forward and probably look at why the public is on you, this is what you said on the 12th anniversary of the Supreme Court about a month ago. And you were talking about crucial jurisprudence. You said, I have had to ask myself whether the highest interest is the public interest or there is a higher interest called the national interest, because the public itself could hurt the national interest. Public can be mobilized or mobilize themselves against national interest. First of all, where does this national interest sit in the Constitution? And number two, wasn't this an indirect proposal of a clawback on basic freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution, Your Excellency?
As you answer this, Your Excellency, you did say that lives of protesters need to be protected as you ensure public safety. Was the public unsafe during that period? Why did we get to that point?
When I spoke at the Supreme Court reflection colloquium on public interest and national interest, some erroneously thought I was talking about government interest or even security interest. That's not the case. In fact, after that colloquium, I've had further reflection, because by the grace of God, I'm also a scholar. So I reflect on some of these things, and I have come to the conclusion that within our constitutional framework, we can categorize three forms of interest that could be expressed by members of the public, rather than two, three. One is popular interest. And the question I'm asking myself as a scholar and a student of constitutional law is whether what is popular is in the public interest all the time. I am not sure. I'm not sure that what is popular is in the public interest. I don't believe. Sometimes yes, maybe not all the times. But at the Supreme Court colloquium, I also asked, is there a hierarchy of norms in our Constitution such that we have public interest and national interest? And for clarity and avoidance of doubt, national interest is not government interest, and it's not the interest of, it's not security. What I had in mind is, you're aware, our Constitution allows the people of Kenya to express themselves in exercise of their sovereignty in two ways. One, through elections. Two, through referenda. And then I asked myself, in fact it was tailored to the judiciary, and I wanted to ask myself, if the people of Kenya, for example, agree and express themselves in exercise of their sovereignty to change the Constitution in a referendum and vote to remove the judicial arm of government, and they decide we don't need the judiciary. People are sovereign. In a referendum, they can actually remove the judiciary. And then I asked myself, since this is an outcome of a referendum, this is in the public interest. But is it in the national, is it in the national interest that really you can have a modern country, a democratic country without a judicial arm of government?
But these are two different scenarios, DP, because this was about taxes that Kenyans felt were unfair, and their leaders
At the
were
Supreme
not
Court,
listening to
I
them.
was not talking about the protest at all. You can look at my statements. I was not talking about protest.
So what do you...
We were reflecting on what the Supreme Court has helped us to understand about our Constitution, and I was inviting the Supreme Court judges to start thinking whether, even as we express our sovereignty, we have what we call bedrock things that we cannot touch. I'll give you another example. If the people of Kenya meet and in a referendum, they overwhelmingly vote, so it is popular, it is in public interest, and they vote to change Article 4.2 of the Constitution that says that Kenya is a democratic multi-party state and create a monarchy or another form of government that is not democracy. It is in the public interest. It is popular. It's in the popular interest. But is it in the national interest? My answer is that it is not. So within the Constitution, there are things you can change and still not change the DNA of our Constitution. There are others, once you touch them, the DNA of Kenya as we know it changes forever. That's what I was discussing.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, Your Excellency, because during your vetting, following your reappointment as Interior Cabinet Secretary, you are on record saying that you will specify designated protest areas, potentially undermining the right to peaceful assembly outlined in Article 37 of the Constitution. How would you justify limiting spaces where Kenyans can express their grievances at a time when the government is facing mounting criticism, and why?
That is the practice in all democracies. Show me one democracy where people are free to express themselves anywhere, anyhow, anytime, notwithstanding the rights of other people, including traffic, the right for traffic to flow, and so forth. I have been, before I became minister, I was an academic. And for about 12 years, I traveled to about 100 countries around the world. So I'm very familiar with many democracies. Many of them, including The Hague, where I spent almost 7 years, in the International Criminal Court trials, they designate places where you go and express yourself. Every institution actually is mandated. If it's Parliament, they designate a place, and then the police gives some routine. They say between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., a certain group will protest. And they tell the police will be about 500 and so forth. And then you protest there, you hand your petition, someone comes and receives petitions, then you vacate. Maybe in the evening another group will come. That's what we might start thinking about. But as long as we think that expression of rights means you venture and frustrate everybody else who is not part of your protest, then we are courting anarchy, and that's not part of democracy.
Peaceful protest, because if we go to Chacha, even when you saw the protests regarding the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, they were just roughed off by police. One even wonders, because we even have had leaders who have expressed a fear and concern that actually it's not even Kenyan police. So who are these that appear when Kenyans exercise the democratic freedom of picketing?
The example you have given was regrettable, and government has already addressed itself to that issue. The Principal Secretary for State Department for Internal Security did
Don't you think the precedences are too many?
Not really. I don't think so. And I think with the apology that the State Department gave, I think Kenyans should give government the benefit of doubt. Mm-hmm. Because if the intention was to keep on doing this thing, then an apology was unnecessary. If you know you're going to do it again, you just keep quiet and do it the following day.
Did you realize this only when you became the interior boss? And despite having served in various capacities in the leadership of the Senate, you didn't think of introducing that bill then?
In 2015, I introduced the Homeland Security Bill, which, as leader of majority in the Senate, which was taken up and became part of it is what became the miscellaneous security laws of 2014. I know some parts of that law were struck out, but 85% of those laws are what has made Kenya.
Specifically on limiting the protesters?
The security laws did not cover the issue of protest. But it covered a wide range of issues that we needed to deal with to make sure that our country is safe. But on the other hand, legislation is work in progress. It doesn't end with one piece of legislation. It happens every day. Democracies which have been in place for 300 years are still making law, even security-related laws. So I did my bit in certain aspects, as the example I've given you, but it is not true that when somebody serves as a member of Parliament or Senate, everything that needs to be legislated will be done during that time.
DP, as we wrap this topic up, there's one question that many Kenyans would like to know. In a Citizen TV interview after the protests, you said that infiltrators were linked to elements within government and opposition. And you said we have evidence leading to political operatives from across the political divide. We will prosecute. How far are we with that? How many of those planners or operatives?
Last time I checked, I've been following up after that, and you know that's not too long ago. That was July. After that, as you're aware, the cabinet was dissolved, the entire cabinet. For that period around August, there was no cabinet. July, August, and then September, the vetting. So by the time I went back to the ministry, it was sometimes, I think, August, October, I can't remember the date. And we are following up on that process. As much as I know, a number of people have already recorded statements, and as far as I know, a file was forwarded by the DCI to the DPP but it was returned to seal certain gaps that have been discovered by the DPP, and therefore that is work in progress. As I said, criminal investigations take long, but I'm sure there will be accountability for everyone who may have either incited violence or taken advantage of the peaceful protest to infiltrate that democratic process.
But you said you have evidence. Why should it take long? Or is it only a preserve of the political class?
That evidence, I have just told you that it was presented to the DPP, and the DPP said it was not enough to convict. You can have evidence which is not enough to convict. I could believe, okay, that the evidence is enough, but the DPP, who has the final say in qualitative and quantitative evidence, is the one who has the police to do more work if we have to sustain prosecution.
So the police didn't do a very good job, that's what you're saying, in the investigation?
This is routine, it happens every day, not just in Kenya, all over the world. The police do their work, and that's why there's that two-tier mechanism. So the DPP looks at it and said, no, we need to fill this using the elements of crime, you need the evidence of this. So we cannot say the police didn't do a good job. It happens every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We would like to move to the next topic, which is your ascension to power as the Deputy President and the politics around it. And this session will be led by Ashwin Mazuri.
All right, Your Excellency, did you play a role in Rigathi Gachagua's ouster?
No.
Then are you proud of the process, the impeachment process that many said were flawed that led to your ascension to power as the Deputy President?
The process you are referring before court, unless you want me to discuss the merits of the matter before court.
So then what's your relationship between you and the ousted, impeached Deputy President?
As it was before.
Are you friends or not?
We are good people, we're good friends. I have no reason to complain in the past, present, and even in the future.
Was there a handover?
Yes.
An official handover?
Was there an official handover?
There wasn't an official handover because the former Deputy President is in court. You wouldn't expect him to hand over if he's in court.
Your Excellency, which IEBC cleared you? Did you take your papers there? How were you cleared by the IEBC?
There's no requirement to clear a Deputy President who ascends to office by virtue of Article 145 read together with 150.
But the
what requires the clearance of IEBC is the President and the Deputy President in an election.
The President's memo to Parliament, Your Excellency, indicated that the nomination was cleared by IEBC.
There was no election. I assumed office through a process different from a process following an election.
Is it an indictment of the judiciary, Your Excellency? Because the former Deputy President, through a court process, is actually outside. We have the governor of Meru, who is in office, even through a similar process. What kind of jurisprudence is that creates two forms of justice in your own understanding? And this is from a point of view as a law professor.
First, the two cases you have cited were beneficiaries of court injunctions. The only difference is in one, after the inter partes hearing of the matter around whether or not the injunction should be preserved. In one case, the court found that the injunction needed to be lifted. In the second case, which also there has been an injunction, the court found yesterday that there is no need to lift the injunction. That's the only difference. And it happens in courts all the time, not just in Kenya, all over the world. In fact, the finding of one court is in many cases overturned by the next court the following day. So there is no inconsistency whatsoever. That is judicial practice. A judge, even one bench of 3 judges, one judge will say this, 2 other judges will say different things, of the same subject matter, same articles, same evidence, same parties. That's how, that's the independence of the judiciary is not just institutional. It is individual, it's decisional. Every judge carries decisional independence.
Your predecessor, Your Excellency, says the reason you ascended to this position is because you are a yes man. You cannot mount any challenge whatsoever to the president. I'm putting this question to you tonight. Are you your own man? Are you a yes man?
I am my own man. On the second issue, I would like to respond as follows. My understanding of the role of the Deputy President is not to challenge the President. It is not in the Constitution. It is not in any law. It is not in any practice. That is not the job description of the Deputy President. As to whether the Deputy President can advise the President, the answer is yes. The oath of office I took has a clause that asks me to faithfully advise the President when my advice is sought.
So then where does your allegiance lie? To the people or your appointing authority?
My allegiance lies on the oath of office I took. You look at the oath of office, it will tell you where my allegiance is.
And are you proud of the
people of Kenya, to the nation and the national interest? And when my counsel is sought by the President, I must give it faithfully. And faithfully doesn't mean that I do it on the podium.
Does it
but
mean
it means I have to be faithful, and faithfully means it could be different from what the President thinks.
DP, are you proud of the manner in which you became Deputy President? In 2022, you were a front runner to be running mate to Dr. William Ruto, but you did not get that position. And you actually said you were going to take a break from politics. Are you now proud that 2 years down the line, you are the one who has taken that position after the impeachment on the person who was picked over you?
I have no regrets for my occupying this space because I have no reason to regret. It is true I was a front runner to be Deputy President in 2022 through a process that was conducted by my party. I was not successful. My brother, Rigathi Gachagua, was successful. I congratulated him, and I said two things. One, that I will support the campaign, the presidential campaign, until 8th or 9th of August 2022. And after that, I will take a break from elective and appointive positions.
But you still took the CS
Just a moment.
position.
Just a moment. After I made those two soul searching and consulting everyone who needed to be consulted, my party and its leadership met and persuaded me as a member of the party, because I didn't say I'll leave the party. I said I'll campaign for President Ruto and his deputy, but after that I'll not be running for any office. Yes. And therefore, the party met and persuaded me to change my mind and accept an appointive position as Minister for Interior, which I accepted. That's all.
Are you the kingpin of the Mount Kenya region?
Which office is that?
Of course, you endorsed.
You are endorsed by a section of members from majorly the East, where you hail from. You never dismissed that.
Which office is that?
Your Excellency, other than the kingpin issue, there are a majority of members of parliament who met in Nanyuki from the Mount Kenya region, that is before you ascended to the office of Deputy President, and endorsed yourself as their link in government. You have ascended to that office now. Are you now, have you ceased being their link?
Maybe you should ask them. Because I think the members of parliament, because I didn't say it, they said it. So maybe they can say it again if they wish, but to the best of my recollection, those members of parliament had expressed frustrations in getting their constituency development agenda through to government because of the breakdown of relationship they had with the former occupier of this office. And therefore, they asked me whether I could convey their needs to the president. And because I was a member of the cabinet, I saw no problem with that. But whether or not they would continue asking me to convey their messages, it's up to them to decide.
Your Excellency, that region. Sir, you come from that region, the Mount Kenya region. Tharaka Nithi, where you come from, is nestled in Mount Kenya region. I want to know, because Kenya Kwanza had promises it made towards the people of that region. So who will be pushing for the implementation of these promises?
That region, like other regions in Kenya, has very many elected leaders. The office I occupy now as Deputy President is an office of the Republic. Unlike other leaders, for example, who have a subnational mandate. And therefore, the way I see it is that the people from the region you're referring to, which happens to be where I was born and raised, have a right, just like the people from the coast, Western, Nyanza, Rift Valley, Northeastern. They have a right to use this office, because it's a national office, to channel their needs, interest to the government. So I see no contradiction, I see no change of position, and the only thing I don't understand is this thing about the kingpin or something. I don't understand it because there is no office like that.
Well, and are you still hopeful, and do you think there is a possibility of you becoming William Ruto's running mate come 2027?
How would I know?
Your Excellency, then you've talked about development and, those members of parliament using this office to lobby for development. Shouldn't then the development be a democratic right so that then there is no need to lobby and to push for it?
That's not true. The reason you have subnational representation of political leaders, members of the National Assembly, members of the Senate, their mandate is subnational. A member of the National Assembly represents the interests, priorities of the constituency where they are elected. Of course, in the context of a broader national perspective, because some of the things that they want them passed are not projects and programs, they are legislative in nature, and you require the parliament as a whole to support you. For example, recently we had a Sugar Act sponsored by a member of parliament from Western Kenya, where sugar is mostly grown. But it required the votes of the member for the members from Northeastern Coast, where there is no sugar, and Central, to pass it. So the point is this: it is not true to say that a member of parliament does not need to articulate the interest of their people, because they are elected purposely for that. They are elected to articulate those interests and convey them either to the executive, to the legislature, and make sure that those interests at that local level are realized.
During your inauguration, when you took oath of office, your boss, the President, Dr. Ruto, said he felt he was a lone voice in the executive. From your interaction, 50 days in, is he still a lone voice? And perhaps you interact with him, he's your boss.
I really don't know.
Do you think you're fulfilling?
I really don't know
do you think you're fulfilling
how he's
that?
feeling?
Yes.
Because again, that's not in my place. I wouldn't know how he's feeling at the moment. All I can say is that I'm doing my best to do my constitutional duty. That constitutional duty is being principal assistant to the president, and also helping him in the delegated assignments that he has given me, and I'm doing my best. How he's feeling now, it's not in my place to tell you how happy he is or
Do you think he's confident of what you're doing? Is he happy with what
I
with your work?
think so. I have no reason to doubt that he's confident.
You've been deputy president for only 50 days now. What would you say is the qualitative difference between you and the former deputy president, given that the operating environment hasn't changed?
It would be very improper for me to start comparing myself with my brother, the second deputy president.
The president has spoken very highly of your leadership and your contributions, as my colleague George Maringa here says. If the president feels that he has accomplished his key goals and decides not to run for re-election, would you consider running yourself? Do you believe that you have what it takes to run the country?
That question is an unfair question. Am I allowed to complain?
Why is that?
It is an unfair question because I have just been entrusted with a very serious and grave national responsibility. What is weighing in my mind now and what is really, really occupying me is the desire to discharge those obligations, because the expectations of the people of Kenya, the expectations of the president are so high. If I started occupying myself with ideas of what will happen, I don't know when, I'll be the most unsuitable person to be seated before you today.
Your Excellency, I want to rephrase Michelle's question regarding you and the former deputy president. Let's not even go with the qualitative differences. But clearly there are lessons you must have learned from Gachagwa's tenure in office. What lessons are those?
You know, my friend, you know, in leadership is defined by certain ethos and parameters. And I want to persuade you to allow me not to discuss my brother, the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua, because he's my friend. And you've not heard me bad-mouthing him anywhere before when he was in this office or even after he left office. So please spare me, because it is not right. It is wrong to start comparing myself with the predecessor or someone who occupied this office now or in the past, or a person who would occupy it in the future. Are you
being cautious, Your Excellency? The region you come from is very restive, and it's quite a significant, it has quite a significant portion in terms of votes. Are you being cautious now when I ask you the question of lessons you've learned? Are you being cautious not to antagonize the former deputy president?
I have no reason to antagonize anybody. For what?
Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, perhaps just to buttress on what John Kiore said, when it comes to lessons learned, many have said that the seat that you occupy now, the deputy presidency, has some sort of curse. They've called it the curse of the deputy presidency. And every individual who's held this seat has had some sort of, falling into political oblivion. Do you believe that you have the magic wand to change this so-called curse of the deputy?
I don't believe any seat is cursed. Let's start from there. Secondly, I don't think it is a priority to start thinking whether I will survive in this seat or not. As I have said, what is weighing in my mind, the same way when I became Interior Minister and the North Rift was in that shape, Lamu, Boni was in that shape, and Northern Kenya was that shape. I told myself, including the passport crisis, I said, if I will last here for 1 year, I want to try my best and have these challenges under control. So for me, I cannot start now entertaining myself on what will happen to me, whether I'll succeed here or there. That's not for me to determine. It's beyond me. What is within my reach, what is within my control, is the focus to deliver on the job. As to whether I survive or what happens, that is not within my reach, and I cannot control what I cannot control.
move forward to the next topic, but I would like to end this with this question. The mountain which you seem to be avoiding is hostile ground right now, and not just the mountain. The government is struggling with its popularity. As the president's principal assistant, how are you working to change that perception of Kenyans? And more so those who are...
Did you say that the mountain is restive?
Yes. The reception in Embu, for example.
Yes.
In Nyandarua the other day, residents refused to listen to the president's speech. In Nakuru County, at a burial, again, they did not want to listen to the president's
That is democracy. That's how democracy works.
Is it that hostile ground to the government that you serve as deputy president now?
You see, there is a difference between running governments and being popular. Those are two different things. And for me, a leader should be least worried about popularity. The worry of a leader should be their pace and focus on transforming the lives of the people.
And do you think the lives of the people have been transformed?
A good leader is not necessarily one who is popular all the time. However, a good leader knows when to be popular.
Don't you think that popularity has gone down because Kenyans' lives
I really don't think so,
negatively?
because at the moment, President Ruto and his administration now in the midterm is not in their priority to look for popularity. There is no election taking place. The task of the government now at midterm is to track the pace of delivery, where there are gaps, seal those gaps, and just deliver on the commitments. The time will come when there will be popularity contests. And let me tell you, for avoidance of doubts, that is not President Ruto's worry. I also don't think that should be the worry of this administration. If we start worrying about popularity now, we'll lose it, time will elapse. We could even win the election next time, but we will not have delivered as we ought to deliver.
Your Excellency, and that transformation that you're talking about, Ashley, allow me, is what brings us into the next topic, which is about the economy, and Joel Chacha is going to lead that session.
Well, the government of the day boasts of a 2.8% inflation rate, which is a 17-year low. But the question here is on the shrinking disposable income, that is through what many may consider overtaxation. And the purchasing power, hence, is low. How are you working to ensure that there is money in the pockets of Kenyans?
Thank you. When President Ruto took over leadership of this country in 2022, the 5 or 6 macroeconomic indicators were not looking good. And I need to clarify now that I have this opportunity. Many people think when we project that time frame so that to show the distance we have covered, we are casting aspersions at the previous administration. That is not true. Kenya got to where it was in 2022 because of factors mainly beyond the control of President Uhuru Kenyatta, because the country's economy was shut down for nearly 2 years by COVID-19. No economic activity. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine, which affected the global supply chain of wheat and other oil and foodstuffs, and many other factors. So when we refer to 2022, it is not political. It's just a fact. And in any case, that's the only way we can explain what we have done. Now, straight to your issue. The macroeconomic indicators were bad. The dollar was rising on a daily basis, 160. At one point, it approached 170. The price of fuel, the same. At one point, it approached 217 per liter for petrol, super. Then inflation was 9.6%. And then if you take the 6 basic food items, starting with unga, the main ones, again, the prices were much higher than they are today. Today, essential commodities 2 years later are down significantly. Just to give unga as an example, from 240, 250, 230, depending on the brand, to now something between 95 and 120, depending on the brand, maybe 120 something. Number two, the foreign exchange stability has been realized for more than a year now. From the high of now 127, 120. The same applies to the price of fuel, which is decreasing every day, every month, including last month when it went down by 4 shillings. Inflation again from 9.6 to 2.8%, the lowest in 17 months. Now, in 17 years. Now, that has not happened by magic or by chance. It has happened because of policy interventions, subsidizing production as opposed to consumption, this fertilizer subsidy, and so many other interventions in various sectors that has managed the macroeconomic situation. It has taken 2 years. But flashback to 2002 when President Kibaki took over, at the exit of President Moi. It took President Kibaki 6 years to bring back macroeconomic stability. President Ruto has taken 2 years. So the 2 years look a bit long, but in the context of what has happened in the past, I think this is a bit. What remains now is what you're asking me. The macroeconomic stability, for it to be felt by citizens, must be followed